Okay, so this is the Accounts Receivable Job Cost webinar. We're going to review the Accounts Receivable module. In Accounts Receivable, under File is where you enter and maintain all of your customers' invoices, receipts, adjustments, anything that you need to do in Accounts Receivable. So on the customer screen, you have, it always comes up to a live record. So you're always on a record, on an actual customer record in our system. So if you want to create a new record, you have to, up on the toolbar here, hit the plus key, which will add a new record. You don't want to come in here and try to change this record to be a new record because that will change this existing customer. So you always want to hit the plus key to add a new record. The customer IDs have to be unique. If I use my binoculars here, I can look up a list of my customer IDs. Now, it can be alphanumeric, it can just be alpha characters, numeric characters, or a combination of both. But it has to be a unique ID. The same one cannot be used twice. So if I have two, if I want to have two Illinois Department of Transportation or IDOT customer IDs, I could do IDOT-2 or IDOT-2 or IDOT-3, but I can't have the same, just plain old IDOT. There is a Z customer ID that has all Z's on it, and you'll see this in a lot of our modules: job cost, payroll, accounts payable, vendor IDs. This is our default record, so it means anything that is on this Z record, whenever you enter a new customer, it's going to default the information that exists on here. This comes in useful on page 2 information, for example, where you have like tax status, or if for your customers you always want your invoices to be due, the due date to default to a certain day. So say I always want my days until due to be 30 days from my invoice date, my due date will then default to that when I enter my invoice, instead of me having to type in the due date every time. So if I save this particular change, and then let's say I go back here, and let's say I want to do plus key, and I'm going to enter a new customer. When I get to page 2, my due days until due are 30. My tax status is true, which it was, or which is taxable, rather, which it was on the Z customer. So everything defaults in from there. As far as customer information, you can enter address. You have 2 address lines. The city and state, if you know the zip code, and you just type that in, the city and state will automatically populate, as well as the area codes. So you have that option. You can manually type them in, but that's just a little easy shortcut for being able to have it automatically populate from our zip code list. We have a zip code list under miscellaneous here, and it's zip codes. And it goes out and finds that zip code and defaults it to whatever city, state, and area code is listed there. Now you can maintain this zip code list by finding, if you find an incorrect one or the area code has changed, you can come and find the zip code that's incorrect, and you can change the area code, or you can add new ones if there's ones that aren't out there. So once you've entered all of the information for the city, state, you can put contact information, title if they have a title, email address. If you put a valid email address in here, just use mine, it will highlight it in blue. If you click on it, it will open up your email program and put that email address into the send to location, and then you can populate an email to that email address. Same with the website. If you have a legitimate website in here, it will again show in blue, and if you click on that, it would take you to that website on the internet, as long as you had internet connection. If you track salesmen, you have a salesman ID field here that you can enter for each customer. Now in our program, we have a F12 key that you can hit, and on the F12, with the F12 key, it'll bring up a list of what it's expecting in that particular field. So in this particular field, it's expecting an employee name to be your salesman ID. So the salesman ID field populates this employee names, and you would go find the name of the employee that is the salesman, and it would populate in here. Now, there are certain fields that don't have F12. For example, contact, you could do F12, but nothing's going to show up because contact is not something that would be stored inside your software program. It has to be something that you're expecting from inside the program. Notes, just a blank note screen where you can enter notes. These notes also show up in this Notes tab here. It's the same place, just a bigger page. Notes 2 is just a second page of notes. On the page 2 information, the sales account, you can do an F12 field here because this is looking for a general ledger account number. So this is going to bring up a list of your general ledger accounts. And you can set it to be a certain sales account if you always want the invoice to default. For example, if this guy's a subcontractor, you may always want the subcontractor number to default in here. So you could put that, sales account in here. Most people just have one sales account or maybe two, one for job-related expenses and one for non-job-related expenses. If that's the case, you don't need to put anything in here because if it goes to a job, the job-related expense will automatically default to whatever's in your control file in the admin section for your sales account. Price types are a way to set different price types per customer, and that would also have to be set up in the admin section. So this company happens to have an option for 15% markup or markdown. In admin accounts receivable, price types is where you would set up the price type that you want to use. And then there are also, and by product class, you can set, if you use our inventory, you can set a markdown per product class. So then they would then produce a discount when you bill using, for this customer, if they're marked to this price type and they have a product class to material, they would then use that discount when you're doing the invoicing for them. Departments, if you have departments, this would show you the list of the different departments that you have that you could set what department this customer is set for. If you offer discounts, you can enter the discount percentage here. If you do offer discounts, you're either going to offer discounts by the discount days, so you have 10 days to pay it, or discount day of the month due. It's due by the 25th to get the discount, or it's due in 10 days to get the discount. It's an either or. Same with the days until due. You can set the days until due to be 30 if you want it to be 30 days after the invoice date, or if you always want your invoices dated a certain day of the month. For example, again, the 25th, and you can put in the 25th of the month here, and your due date would always populate the 25th of the month from the invoice date. You have different tax statuses that you could set the customers to, whether they're tax exempt or resale or use tax, different options here. You can set a credit limit per customer. So if you don't want to extend a lot of credit to certain clients, you can set a credit limit. It does populate a message when you go to invoice them that this customer may be getting close or maybe over their credit limit status. It still allows you to continue on, but it will give you at least a warning. You also have options to print statements. A lot of customers use the statement, and when you enter a new customer, you have to go back here and manually check that to make sure that they are printing statements. So if you have it marked on the Z customer, it will automatically check that box, so you'll be sure that every new customer has that checked, and you won't wonder why you can't print a statement for this particular customer. If you use the service charges, that would also have to be checked if you plan on service charging this particular customer for past due amounts. You can require a purchase order. You can place customers on COD or on hold, depending upon their status. These pop up a message as well as the credit limit would to let you know if the customer's on COD or on hold or if a PO is required. It'll give you a message at the time of entering the invoice and say that this particular customer requires that information. It allows you to continue on, but at least it gives you a warning message. So then if I want to save that record, I then have my new customer record in here. Directions, self-explanatory for just being able to put directions to the customer site if you need them. User fields are an extra place to put things that maybe we don't have a place for in our customer screen and you want to store. So you have 4 date fields, 4 number fields, and 10 text fields. You can turn into anything you would like to store information, extra information about this client. One other thing on the customer screen, there is a copy address button here. What that copy address button does is copy the customer name, address, city, state, zip, and phone number, along with their contact information, to a clipboard. And from that clipboard, you could paste it into Word if you need to send a letter, or Excel if you wanted to create labels, or possibly like an envelope or something, to put that name and address on there. You can update the customer hold status by going in here, and you can set customers on hold based on the parameters that you enter here. So if you want to say when invoices are 120 days old as of this date, I want to put all customers on hold. And it's going to then produce a list and show you which customers it's going to put on hold. Now, if you want to go through and update this again in the next month, you would take the option of take all customers off hold, and then it would uncheck that box and take them all off hold. And then you could reset them onto hold based on your criteria. Under invoices is where you enter and maintain invoices. This again comes up to live records. So these are previous invoices that have been done. Your individual companies may have a lot of invoices here depending upon how long you've been with us. You could have a lot of invoices that show up here. Invoices don't leave this screen unless they've been fully paid and closed out, and then you run the purging step. The purging step then removes them from this screen, but you still get them in a history file. You could still pull them up from the history. When you enter an invoice, if I were to enter an invoice, a new invoice for the new customer that I created. So here is an example of the different warnings that it's going to give me. It's requiring a purchase order, customers on COD, and the customers on hold. So it allows me to continue. If I don't enter a customer PO in there, and say I put in let's say I don't have a purchase order in there, it will stop you from saving it until there is a purchase order in there. So if you have that purchase order is required, it does not let you save it until you actually have a purchase order. And then I can say, yes, I put the purchase order in, and it would let me save it. Now I have the option to email this invoice. So this would create an email. When it'll actually go to print the invoice, and it'll give me options here. How do you want to print it? We have many different options. We're just doing regular invoices, so I'm going to just pick that option. So what it does then is it creates a PDF in my email, and it's going to, this is the invoice. It attaches automatically the invoice, and this is just in one of our standard formats. then you can email the customer. It populates the email that I have on this customer record. You can manually change this information if you want to type something else in here. And then you would push send. If you were to discount, the discount would show down here at the bottom, or you could manually enter in a discount here. If you wanted to offer a discount, you can manually enter in a summary here that would print at the bottom of the page, the summary section. If I save this and I print this, I have a summary section which shows up down here. If I wanted to delete this invoice, I could, there's a notes section on invoices too. You can enter notes. So if you're doing collection notes, you want to keep track of your collection notes. If you're having problems collecting the money, you can come in here and you can enter notes. And these notes, there is an aging that these notes will print on, so you can see a history of the collection notes. If I want to make an adjustment to an invoice, adjustments show in red. You'll see this invoice I have on the screen has a red detail line. That means that this detail line is an adjustment. These are regular line items that we entered at the time of the invoice. This is an adjustment that was entered. Most adjustments are to adjust the price if this invoice has already been paid, or this invoice, it wasn't paid in full, and you want to adjust off the balance. Then you would come in and you could do an adjustment to adjust off the balance of the invoice. Or if the invoice was already posted, or the month was closed, you can't get back to that invoice and you wanted to change the price, then you would do an adjustment. The other reason for doing adjustments is if you use retention and you want to release retention. You would then need to do an adjustment to release any retention. Invoices contract is another way to do invoicing in our system. You can it's based on the original estimates or the contract amounts that you would enter into the job phase screen. So down here at the bottom, it shows you what this particular job's original estimate was, change orders, and the current estimate. It also shows you the invoice total of this particular invoice plus job to date, what's been billed. So if you wanted to do a new invoice for a certain job, so let's say if we wanted to do a new invoice for job 10 for today's date, it's going to bring in the phases automatically for that job. And it's going to bring in the contract amounts for that job. So it'll show you the phase ID, the name, the contract units, unit of measure, unit price, and the contract dollars. Now it also shows you on this side what you've billed, your previous billings, what you've got remaining to bill. So I can select to bill by units if I want to bill out units. Like, for example, this first line has been overbilled. It's got 202 units, and the contract units are only 45, which gives you your remaining units of 157. But I can select to bill by units. For example, this one, if I have 6,000 units remaining here, I can say I want to bill 1,000 units. My price per unit is $10, so it's going to give me my new billings of 10,000, and then my new retention of 500, which is 5%. It's also going to show you your total retention that you have so far, and then it updates your remaining units. Now I can go down here and I can select other phases that I want to bill, or maybe I just want to bill that one phase. You can also bill by total dollars or by dollars. So by dollars means that I would enter in a new dollar amount versus entering new units. So if I wanted to enter, maybe $5,000 on this particular one, but I didn't want to bill it by units, I could do that. And I could just enter a portion of the contract dollars that I want to bill out for. When I save this invoice, it's only going to save the 2 phases that I actually put billings on. It's not going to save all the other phases on this particular invoice because these are the only 2 that I am actually billing out for this. When I go to print this invoice, we have different options for contract billing. You can get contract billing in different ways. You can get it with a schedule of values or with a sworn statement. You can also print AIAs from our system. These AIA options here would print on pre-printed AIA forms that you would have to order through a certain website that we can give you the information on. You also have the option to do lien waivers from here, or also schedule of values, which creates an Excel sheet. So I'm just going to do these contract with schedule for right now, and that'll show you our contract invoice, which gives you your original contract amount, your change orders, which is your current contract, your work completed to date, your retentions to date, and then the net due this invoice and your balance to complete. On the next page, it's going to give me my schedule of values. So this should match up with your scope of work or your schedule of work. You have your different phases, and this shows you what you've billed on each phase from previous applications and then for this period. It also gives you your balance to finish and then retainage on here, what your retention is for each phase. Now, if I were to print this invoice using AIA, say it's application 1, the AIA will look like this on your screen, but you have to load the actual forms, the pre-printed forms that have all the wording in the boxes there, and everything should line up into those boxes if you've ordered the proper forms. And then it does also print like a schedule of values or the second page, the G703, in that same type of format where it shows you the phases, your contract dollars, your previous, your current billed. It gives you your totals for each column down here. Again, I have the option to email this invoice, so I can email it from the screen the same way as I could from the other screen. I also have the option to make notes if I want to keep some notes on this invoice for whatever reason. It does still have a summary section that you could print information in here if you wanted to. Because this is not posted, I could change this still if I wanted to in here. I want to change this to be 2,500 instead, I could do that. Or if I wanted to change units, if I wanted to bill by units, I could also change that. The red X up on the toolbar is the undo of changes. So I've changed this, but I don't want to save my changes. I want to go back to where it was when before I made my changes. So I can do that red X and it undoes that and it puts it back to where it was before I tried to make changes. Time and material, IDOT, and service billing are modules that are for gathering time and material transactions. See if we have anything out here. This is a way to gather costs in, actual costs for the job, and then create a bill or an invoice based on those costs. So it would show you the labor, any equipment, material, or subcontract work for a particular job based on your gather. So when you go into the gather portion, you have the option for putting the job ID, phase, the date range that you want to go through. So if you want to do it for the month of February, you would put in February's date range. You can select which cost types you want to go out and gather the costs for. You can select if you're going to gather the costs based on the AP invoice existing or just based on purchase orders. You say OK, it will go out and it will gather those costs and it will create this transaction that I had just showed you with the costs in it that you had gathered, or with the date range that you had asked for. Then when you go to print an invoice like this, I'm not going to create an invoice, I'm just going to show you what it's going to look like. It's going to do an invoice here, and it shows you the different types of labor that you had, what their rates are, what their hours are, what their rates are, and then what their amounts are. And you have the option to mark up for labor burden and labor additives. And then it gives you details on the labor, and it'll show you a summary of the labor hours. And since there was no other options here, it's just labor, that's all it's going to show you. But here's where you can set the markups for each particular transaction. Those default in from the control file, but you have the options to change them. Adjustments is where you would make adjustments if you need to. The customer adjustment, actually we're going to do our new customer, and we'll date it today. And then that would bring up all the invoices for that particular customer. You can also select a job, so you can bring up all the invoices for a particular job. Now here I can do an invoice adjustment. I can increase it by a positive amount, or I can decrease it with a negative amount. And let's say I want to add retention to this. I can add retention by going in the retention adjustment column. If I apply this, it's changed my net invoice, and it's changed my retention. Now, another thing I can do is I can adjust retention using this Adjust Retention button at the bottom of the screen here. That's going to bring up a little sub box, and it is going to allow me to adjust retention. So if I want to adjust retention to 0, I say OK. Oops, I got to put my job in. Okay, now if I want to adjust retention to 0, I can hit that button. Or if I want to have a new retention percentage, right now it's at 5%, I can adjust it to 2% or whatever retention percentage I want. Or I can choose to adjust just a certain dollar amount, or I can choose to set the remaining retention to a certain dollar amount. Most cases, you're reducing it by a certain percentage, or you're adjusting it to 0. In this case, if I adjust it to 0, it automatically is going to put in a retention adjustment in this column, the amount equal to the retention. I can apply that, and my retention is now 0. Now, if I go back into invoices, and I look up that invoice, I can see my adjustments here in red. So if these adjustments, I need to change them, I can click on this Change Delete adjustment. As long as they've not been posted or paid, I can come in here and I can either change the date, because I need them to show up a certain way on my billing, so I can adjust the date, or I can adjust the amount. Say I didn't want to adjust the $12 and I just wanted to do the $150, I can do that, and now I can view entire invoice, and now my invoice total is back to what it was before. I made the other adjustment. I can also delete these by hitting them double minus. If I want to get rid of the adjustment, I can get rid of them that way. Or I can do it in here, and I can hit the double minus in the adjustment view. And now I can go back to view entire invoice, and my invoice is back here. Now if I want to undo what I just did, I can hit the undo button. It'll just bring back the last transaction that I deleted. It doesn't bring back the entire thing. But it will bring back at least one line if I wanted it to. When you receive money in for your invoices, you go into Select Receipts to make payments. Use that same customer. Once you type in the customer, it'll show you the open invoices for that customer. You would type in the check number, deposit ticket number. If you have multiple deposits on one day, and on your bank statement, the bank always groups the same deposits together as one lump sum. If you put the same deposit ticket number, we always recommend that you use the date. So if you put in a date of 3/15/2017, on all of your receipts that you deposited this day, cash management will lump them all together as one line item, like your bank statement does. And that's the purpose of the deposit ticket number. I can type in a T for my receipt date for today. Defaults to my accounting month and year, the same as my receipt date. My check amount, say they gave me $500. You can also change your cash receipts if you have multiple cash accounts and it's going to a different account. Now in here, I can, if I click on this pay, it's going to try to pay more than what I have. And you'll see here that selected to pay is 906, but not applied is a negative 391 because I'm overpaying, paying more money than I'm supposed to. You also notice a discount popped up because we've got discount allowed on there, or discount available of $15, which took the discount or gave the discount to that customer. So I don't want to pay the entire amount. So I need to drill into this invoice. This shows me by job and phase what I've got available. And now I can click in here and I can say I want to put in $500 here and pay $500 off of this first line item. Now my not applied is 0 and my selected to pay is 500. If I change that back to 0, my not applied is equal to my check amount and my selected to pay is 0. So that's a way to keep track if you've applied the correct amount of money. So I could change this to $350, and then it shows you what you have not applied yet. If I wanted to put $150 on that line, I could do that. now when I go back up here, it still shows me that I have a discount available. If I wanted to give them the discount, I could go in here and collect that, but then I've got a not applied of $15, so then I would have to go in and put another $15 on here. Or I can not allow the discount and say that we're not going to give them the discount right now. I say OK here, it's going to record the receipt. Now if I go back into my invoice screen, my invoice will now say receipts applied. So it won't show me what receipts have been applied, but now I can still change this adjustment if I need to. But I cannot delete my detail lines anymore. Those have become inactive because I've got a receipt applied to it. And that's once you apply a receipt, it locks down the invoice, so you can't make changes to what has a receipt applied to it already. An invoice copy feature here would copy this invoice to a new invoice. And then you could make it a different invoice number or the same invoice number, or you could use a different invoice number of your choosing. You could use the same invoice number if you were to put a letter, or you could do a -1 if you want to keep the invoice numbers the same, or you could do an A and it would copy that invoice. You can change the date. So if you have recurring invoices that you send out, you could set up a group of different invoices just by copying them, and it would have the same billing information on it. Review delete receipts is a place where you can see what receipts you've applied. So if I use my binoculars, I can see the receipt that I just entered. I can change the deposit ticket number, I can change the date, but I can't change the invoices that it's been applied to. So if I realize that I applied it to the wrong invoice, I would have to delete this receipt and re-enter it. I cannot change the invoice number that it's been applied to. Service charges is where if you use this option, you would go ahead and produce your service charges through running this step. It would bring you and get you a service charge report and then ask you if you wanted to create service charges. Drill down is where you can look at what your customers owe. It also will show you how much you've done with them from the beginning of time. So you can see past invoices that have already been paid, and you can also see all your open invoices. So if I drilled into our new customer, it would show me the one invoice that we did. It would show me the amount that's open, and then also gives you the original invoice amount. If I drill into it again, this shows me by phase, by job and phase, what I have here. And then if I drill one more time, it will show me the receipts that I've made and then adjustments. So I would be able to see when I've paid or when the customer paid me, when I made the adjustments or what I've adjusted off, and how it got to be the total open that it is currently. So then you drill back up on the right-hand side, the green box with the black arrow, and I can drill back up the individual levels until I get to the main level. Drilling down goes to the invoice level. Then it goes to the phase level, and then it goes to the detail level where you can see adjustments and receipts. Drill down also will show you your total invoiced, your total retention, and your total net open. Post transactions and purge transactions are part of the month-end closing step. When you go to close the month, there is a whole procedure. We have a checklist that you can see in the help menu that will show you the different steps you need to take. And this posts the transactions for the month that's showing here so that they cannot be changed anymore. And when you click this close month year flag, it would move the month to the next month. So it would change your month from January to February. It gives you a report showing you the transactions that it's posting. Purging is that step that I mentioned earlier, where if you have paid invoices, they're fully paid off, the balance is zero, you can purge through a certain date, and all fully paid invoices as of, for example, this date of 9/2015 would be purged out of the file accounts receivable invoices screen. So then you wouldn't have a bunch of invoices collecting there, and it kind of cleans that up a bit. It does give you a report, shows you what it's purging. And you can still see them on the history report. So reports, accounts receivable history would still show you all transactions you've been purged with. For each customer or job, if you wanted to just run it by job, you have an option for invoices, receipts, or both. And then it would show you transactions for that job. It gives you totals at the end. Accounts receivable drill down from the reports menu is the same exact drill down that it is from the file menu. It's just a different place to get to it because some people don't have access to file and only have access to reports. Customer list is, of course, just a list of customers with their addresses. If you choose to print balances, the accounting month and year becomes active. And then you can enter a date range in here. So for example, if I wanted to see what customers done with me for the year of 2016, I can put in my dates like here, and I can say OK. And it's going to give me a customer trial balance that shows the billings, any discounts, and then receipts. So this is pretty useful as far as if you want to see how much a client does with you and how many receipts that they've paid you. Customer labels, not a very useful option. It just prints one sheet of labels, one label per customer. You can't change it. You can't adjust it at all. It would just give you every customer one label per customer. We have options to print invoices in a batch instead of printing them individually. So you could enter a bunch of AR invoices in the computer and then you could print them at one time, but you only have the options, these 4 options to print, instead of when you normally go into invoices, you'll have more options than these, but you only have these 4 options to print the invoices. When you do print reports to in our system, you could change the destination to file, which would print the report to Excel. So you probably wouldn't print batch invoices to Excel, but if you wanted an invoice edit report, you could choose file, and if you choose this browse button, it would bring up, ask you where do you want to save it. Most of the time you would go to your desktop, you could name it whatever you want to. If this, in this case, this is going to be an AR invoice edit. You're going to leave the file type as Microsoft Excel. If you hit OK, it's going to print this to an Excel file. It's going to populate this path in here, and it's going to create an Excel file on your desktop of this report. All of our reports can be printed to file and go to Excel. We have that option for all of them. Adjustment edit will give you a list of your adjustments. The invoice edit, of course, gives you a list of your invoices. You can go backwards and print an invoice edit, for previous date range. If you're looking for certain things or you want to see what you've billed for a certain customer or certain job, you can also run this for a previous period if you need that information. Adjustment edit is the same way. You could enter, it defaults to your current accounting month and year. You could enter any accounting month and year that you want. I could go back to 2015 and run one. I can select it just for a certain job, or I can put in an invoice number if I happen to know that information. Receipt edit gives you a list of your receipts for the month or for any previous time frame or future time frame that you have receipts entered for. This is where you run your agings and your statements. Your agings are the different customer agings. This is the aging that prints description totals or description notes. So if you want to include customer notes, you have that option here. And if I go to the screen, here's my notes from this new customer that we entered. And I don't know if any of these other customers have notes. Probably just this customer does. But the notes would show right under the customer ID. We have 4 standard statements here, which you could use if you printed statements. We also have statement crystal reports. Those are a little bit nicer statements. They're a little bit cleaner and clearer to see. We have many options, many more options than what you have on just the 4 standard. So this would be crystal report statements that would fire up a crystal report that can give you options of with retention, without retention, however you want to see it. Fire up this one. You could look through these to see which ones that would work for your company, but basically this is just a simple one. Gives you the invoice number, invoice date, the due date, and the amount. It also gives you a little aging as to how old it is or when it was aged. History is the history report, again, that pulls in transactions that have been purged, as well as all the other transactions. Under admin, accounts receivable, you have your control file. These are your control file options where you can turn on or off discounts, retentions. These are normally set up prior to you using the system, and you don't normally need to change anything back here. This is also where your last invoice number is stored. When you go to enter a new AR invoice, the invoice number will populate based on what's in this file. It comes back here, looks at this, and populates the next number. If you use a number outside of the number that populates from here, it does not increment this, and it leaves it set at what it is until you use that actual number. This is where you set where you want to purge transactions through. So how many months do you want to save your transactions for before you purge them? We normally recommend for new customers like 24 months. Once you get on the system for a while and you get a lot of data, you may want to cut that back to 12 months. Personal preference for your company. You have the option to print company name, and the company name will just print in standard block, left justified, name, address, and phone number. You also have the option to use a logo. So you could put a logo in here of your company's logo. It has to be 1 inch by 7.5, and it has to exist somewhere on your system. So then you would have the logo stored somewhere in your system. Find it. It has to be in one of these formats down here. Now, so it's like a picture. It has to be a picture file. And then you can populate it up in here, and then it's going to print on all of your AR invoices. where also you have options to, if you use multiple cash accounts for receipts, statements, if you use our T&M module. The invoice summary section here and the contract summary, this prints at the bottom of every invoice that you print. And if you wanted a message or some phrase or wording, anything that you want to say at the bottom of each invoice, you would put it in here. It prints on every invoice that you print from the regular invoice screen. If you use our contract invoices and you want something to print on the bottom of every contract invoice, then you would put it in this contract section. Page 2 of the control file shows you your current accounting month and year and when you last purged. This is also where, if you use our time and material module, that you would store your markups that default in the time and material program. This is where you can maintain and change your percentages as needed. Control accounts, Control accounts is what the general ledger account number that defaults when you do cash receipts or when you enter discounts. What's the account number going to default to? It has to default to something. Your receivables account as well. And then retention and service charges. So these are the accounts that it gets posted into behind the scenes when you use these options. And of course, this is again the logo. In the Help menu, we have an Accounts Receivable section. In here, under AR Monthly Close, is where you'll find the month-end checklist. This is the checklist. There's one for every module. It gives you the procedures, how to close a month. Step-by-step instructions, where to find the reports, how to print them. The verify steps that you need to do for posting, all the way down through the purging. You can print these out simply by hitting the print button. And I normally recommend that you print like a master set and just make a copy of them every month when you do your monthly close. But this will give you information if you want to learn about AR invoices, give you like how to enter an invoice, change an invoice, adjust an invoice. It just gives you step-by-step instructions for what each field is going to be looking for. Up here we have, there's a customer list under Cust. This is like a Rolodex file. It's just a quick list of, it looks like a search grid, and you can search here. You can type in, like if I want to find something in the M's, I can type an M and it takes me to the M's. If I want to find something that starts with a T, I can type a T and it takes me there. I can also do that in the phone number. If I want to find phone numbers that start with 312, I can type 312 and it takes me there. It searches what I've typed in. It puts them in that order. This is just a way to look up addresses, phone numbers, fax numbers, any information, contact names. You cannot make any changes here. You can just look at the list, and then when you're done, if you hit enter, it takes you back out. If you're a shortcut or keyboard person instead of a mouse person and you want shortcuts, under Navigate, there is different shortcuts in our system. Things that you can do to add a record would be Control-A, to save a record is Control-S, to do your binoculars, which is the lookup, is Control-L. So these are keyboard shortcuts that you can use in our software. Let's see. If I have multiple windows open, for example, I have my customer screen open and I have my invoice screen open. The invoice screen covers up my customer screen, so I could, minimize that customer screen to find, or my invoice screen to find my customer screen, or I could go to the window and it shows me down here what windows I have open. So I can go back and forth between customers if I want to bring back up customers. And then I can just click on invoices to get back to invoices. But instead of having to minimize it, I could click on the window and look for my customer screen. Anybody have any questions on anything? That's the end of the webinar. That concludes the webinar for today. If you have any questions, you can let me know. Otherwise, thank you for attending. Hope you found it informative. And you can always call into the office if you have any questions.
Thank you.